Joining me now is Bill Kehoe, the CIO for the state of Washington. Bill, how's it going? Thanks for being here.
It's going great, Jake. Always love talking with you on these topics. Looking forward to this discussion today.
Absolutely. So, Bill, we're here at the IT Modernization Summit, and you and I have known each other quite a while now, and you've been in the public sector space for a bit as well. Tell me a little bit about kind of this moment in modernization, right? We've been talking about that word for many years, but what's different about 2025? What's different about this like exact time when we talk about modernization in state government?
Yeah, it's an ex exciting time when we talk about modernization. I think governments have traditionally thought of modernization as, hey, we need to replace an old system with a new system, and that's how we operated, right? And there's problems with that in terms of we're not addressing a lot of other components which are now part of modernization, which I'll talk about. But I'm really seeing a new mindset around what modernization means. And the reason I'm excited about it is for years I've talked about how you have to bring agency, IT, and business together as a strategic partnership. They can't be opposite or siloed. It just doesn't work anymore. And modernization really brings that technology together with agency customers on the business side around a disciplined strategy to improve services to our residents. And it also deals with the tech debt. Um, it's just an exciting change, I think, that's occurred over the last couple of years.
And what do you, I mean, when you think about that, let's dive into the how a little bit. So we talk about pulling business and agency a little bit, or business and IT a little bit closer together, but what does that look like in practice? And how is modernization kind of that force point to pull that stuff together?
Yeah, so first let's really talk about the components of modernization. Because just replacing legacy systems really hasn't yielded us the results we need. It's very narrow focused, it's very technology first focused, does not address key components that we're looking at. So for instance, modernization is really focused on the customer experience. First and foremost, the customer experience. Getting that right, modernizing that experience, making that experience as frictionless as possible. Also, then it's focused on business process. And that's where we fell short, I think, when we're just replacing systems, as we weren't looking at the business process or in many cases, the customer experience. Also, it's very focused on data and, master person index, focused on the client first, very focused on cloud architecture, enterprise services and shared services, cybersecurity, data protection. And modernization really allows us to implement AI, um, not just looking for an AI use case, but incorporating AI into all these different components around modernization. So modernization is really brings together, I think, um, the strong business and IT and industry partnership in a very collaborative culture where business and IT are working as one and not separate entities. And it requires all of the business and IT skills and disciplines to work as one to orchestrate the changes required.
And when you think about that, and I like that you sort of defined what the new modernization is there. Like what is that? How do we avoid kind of falling into the same traps as we fell into in legacy modernization, right? As you said, updating old things is part of this, but how do we keep that alignment focus to be that partner to continue to change the business processes as well?
Well, I think what we're going to be pivoting to is instead of having like a just an IT strategic plan, which is still going to be important. I think organizations are going to come forward with modernization plans, and the modernization plans will start with the customer, as we talked about, how the customer consumes the services that the agency or department provides, what improvements need to be made to the services to make them as efficient as possible, and then work backward through the business process, through the tech, et cetera. And if we approach each investment request from a modernization perspective, where IT is a component, but it's not the total investment request, and we start thinking about projects more as business projects, not IT projects, then I think this is sustainable. It is a mindset shift. That doesn't mean that, we can't, we're also going to have modernization of, infrastructure, et cetera. But it all points to serving our residents in a better way. And I think that's what our legislature wants to see. And that's what our agency customers want to see, is that we're focused on the residents and what they're consuming and making that experience as seamless as possible. And when we do that, it's going to make our investment requests much better, because today, like our legislature will get 50 to 100 requests that are IT related. And it's very difficult for them to understand, well, what to fund, what not to fund, given the budget shortfalls and everything else. But if we can actually wrap that into a modernization strategy, I think it'll make a lot more sense than it does today.
And I mean, what I think we're talking about here is moving beyond that seat at the table that we've been talking about in the CIO world for years, and really into almost that execution level, right? With all of your different partners, and making sure that everything is happening. Um, from your experience in Washington and LA County and King County and all the other places you've been in your career, I mean, how do you advise your peers to do that, right? I mean, that's a big shift for especially entrenched bureaucracy, things that have been going on the same way for a while. How does that shift happen, and how can CIOs and IT offices sort of be at the center of that?
I think it starts with strategy. And I'm not talking about IT strategy, I'm talking about state or agency strategy. And you have to have business and IT part of that strategy. And then as you look at your customer experience and the improvements and changes to the services you provide, or new services you need to provide, that's where you need to pull this multidiscipline team together of business, IT, and industry. Industry plays a big role in these modernization projects. It's a great niche for them, because all the different components of modernization require potentially different industry skills as well. And it's much better for them than responding to an RFP with 1,000 requirements to replace a system. So yeah, I think it starts with a strategy. It starts with the improvements to services, and it starts with programs. Like, there are a lot of programs that are common to states, whether it's homelessness or poverty reduction. These are really big problems, right? And pulling teams together from the business, from these programs, um, and then starting on this modernization journey, I think is where we all need to get to. But it's a mindset shift, and but I'm seeing that it's starting to take hold, right? Like, you go look at the NASCIO top 10, and whether it's cybersecurity or customer experience or data, workforce, right? These are all things that are part of modernization, and I'm seeing it talked about more and more in that regard.
And kind of to Well, I have two more questions. I was going to pull it all together, but I have one more. What does that say about the shifting job of the CIO, right? If all of those priorities are modernization, how is the supposed IT leader of state government in a different position now as opposed to maybe 5 years ago?
I think that's really the CIO role is much less technology focused, much more of a business broker. And I think also what I've experienced in Washington, and what I think other CIOs are experiencing as well, is that we play key roles in these modernization projects and programs. And no longer can we just, get a project started and then hope that it finishes well. we've got to be really involved with our leaders at the agency levels and the project teams to ensure that these are successful because they're complex. And many of these now are not just one agency projects, they're multi-agency projects. So the complexity is there and it requires a different program and project teams and a different focus for state CIOs.
And to kind of wrap up now officially, when we talk about that complexity, what does that look like for you in Washington? What are some of the ways that you're doing that very thing of modernizing kind of strategically instead of just chasing, fun, flashy technology change?
Well, I think we are being more diligent in terms of the capacity of any one agency to take on these projects and really looking at um, the independent organizations or WATEC, for instance, really leaning in and putting these projects together, making sure we have good governance, and that a lot of times the agencies can really provide the SMEs, but when it's a multi-agency project, you just can't pick one agency, and so I think what we're going to see more of is that for these really high-profile projects you have an independent organization that's really going to be established that's going to run these projects, govern these projects, and put teams together that are really needed to make them successful.
And so you're talking about kind of like a project management team beyond just IT, but something much larger
Yeah.
in scale.
Right. That has all the skill sets needed, whether that's a PMO, the data piece, the architecture piece, all the disciplines needed to really be successful on these modernization projects. And many
And
times, one agency, if they're really complex, they don't have all these skills, right? And so we want to set up a blueprint for success, if you will, for these really high complex projects because we can't fail on these. I mean, when we get the opportunity and we get the funding, especially if we're in these tight budget times, we have to be successful, and our residents depend on us being successful. So there's a lot at stake, and it requires, I think, a different model for not all projects, but some of the high complex, high visibility projects.
hmm, man, I could talk about this all day. I have like 16,000 follow-up questions for you, but we're out of time for now. Bill, thanks for being with us and thanks for all you're doing in this space.
All right, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure, Jake.
And to our audience, stay tuned for more from today's IT Modernization Summit coming up next.